Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. This is the post-game podcast from yet another exciting Timberwolves comeback win over a really good playoff team, and this time on the road. We're going to break down the Wolves' win over the Miami Heat, Ant's stellar performance down the stretch, Rudy Gobert's amazing defense, and just the depth of the Wolves showing through. We'll break the whole game down here on the show. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Beecken. I'm the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Tuesday, everybody, and it is a very happy Victory Tuesday. Another exciting Timberwolves win Monday night, and it was almost kind of rinse and repeat from the last win. Right? Fall down big early on the road and to a good team, in this case, a full strength good team. And then you come back and win down the stretch. There's so much to get to in this game. And the Wolves stars played like stars, but I want to talk a lot about the depth too. Just a packed show today because this stretch of Wolves basketball. And I mean, by that, I mean, I guess the last 2 months really, right, has just been so unbelievable for someone who's followed the Wolves now for, the vast majority of their existence. I mean, I don't really know what else to say to start the show today, right? Like it just keeps happening. And this is a game, the Wolves were actually underdogs in this game by a couple points over at FanDuel at Miami, a full strength Miami team getting Tyler Hero back, getting Bam Adebayo back after extended absences for each, and Jimmy Butler playing, and McDaniels and Ant questionable. I didn't really think the Wolves were going to win this game, and certainly not when they got down 17, but I think we just have to start accepting the fact that, 4 times out of 5, the Wolves are going to be in the game and have a real shot to win, if not more often. And to this point in the season, they've literally won 4 out of every 5 games. They're 20-5 through the first 25 games of the season. All right, lots to get to. A big thank you to those that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere, including YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find this show. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app, which you can download on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. You can also follow on Twitter. My account is at Beecken with 2 B's, 2 E's, CKEN. You can also follow the show account at Locked On T-Wolves. Don't forget the T. All right. Did I say wow yet? I mean, put this up there in terms of wins this season, along with the Boston overtime win, that Thunder win after Ant got hurt. The Wolves not come back. They hold serve throughout the end of the game and beat a really good Thunder team. The Denver win very early in the season. The Knicks win after the 5-game road trip, coming back and winning at home against a solid Knicks. Those are the 4 that come to mind at the top of my head, most impressive wins. And of course, there's been a few others sprinkled throughout, just in terms of some of the dominance the Wolves have displayed, and also some of these good teams missing good players, right? There's been plenty of those games too that the Wolves have won. They beat Miami without Jimmy Butler. They beat the Pacers without Halliburton the other night. They beat that Mavs win was impressive last week too. That could fit on that list too. This is right up there. I mean, the Wolves, in terms of how this game unfolded, the Wolves gave up 66 points in the first half to Miami. And Miami's a good offensive team. They're top half of the league in terms of offensive efficiency. They are number 1 in terms of 3-point percentage, by the way. And of course, getting Tyler Hero back, this is only the 9th game he's played all season. He's missed a month with an ankle sprain, and Bam Adebayo had missed the last 10 days or so. This is only the 17th game he's played in this season. So both of those guys coming back, and clearly, whereas you look at the Saturday Halliburton Pacers game when Halliburton sat, the weird rest, lack of rest, Pacers, playing Friday night in DC, flying, never going to the hotel, flying the next day. Halliburton ends up sitting out, and obviously he still got banged up Friday night. So and before the travel stuff, they'd said he may not play. But we're starting to see teams kind of err on the side of we're probably not going to win, especially in Minnesota, right? We're probably not going to beat this team. Let's sit this guy. Whereas in past years, it was, hey, we're going to beat the Wolves without our best players. Let's sit them. Now on the road, the Heat were like, hey, let's gear up. Like, let's beat this team on our home floor, full strength. Bam's back, Hero's back. Let's do it. And sure enough, they dropped 66 in the first half. Miami goes up. What was the score? The Wolves were down 12 at halftime. This was a 17-point lead at one point in the second quarter. Minnesota kind of started to push back. They finally got some offensive flow in the second quarter. Something I'll get back to later. The Wolves actually added, there was a bit more structure as the game went on for the Wolves offensively, which, first quarter ends up being a little bit more playground style. And then occasionally in the fourth quarter, the Wolves have some of that going on too. But in this game, it became a little more structured in the second quarter. The Wolves started making open shots. And weirdly enough, after they had guys in foul trouble, like Karl-Anthony Towns got into some foul trouble, I guess it was more late in the first half. Jaden McDaniels had been in foul trouble prior to that already. It was those bench guys again that really kind of got things going for the Wolves. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Naz Reid, those guys were so good in the second quarter of this game. Once again, this is like the second or third straight game I've said that. I mean, you probably say that in 2/3, 3/4 of the Wolves games to this point this season. But the Wolves' depth really shone through. And we'll talk more about that here next segment when I get into some of the key takeaways. But that was the first time when it was really obvious, was the second quarter. And just strong stints from everybody off the Wolves bench, kind of covering for the guys that were in foul trouble, which again was Cat and McDaniels. By the way, Cat had 3 fouls in the first half, didn't commit a single foul in the second half. Unless I have, I'm almost 100% confident that that's what happened. I think he had 3 right before halftime, didn't commit another one in the entire second half of this game. And I thought Towns was good on both ends, by the way. It's not like he was, playing scared by any stretch. So second quarter, big bench play to get the Wolves, to at least kind of stem the tide and get the Wolves to within 12 at halftime. The Wolves did their thing in the third quarter. Offensively, they didn't quite come to the party. There was a bit too much of a back and forth late in the third when the Wolves could have actually really eaten into the lead. They did. They were only down 6 going to the fourth. But it easily could have been I think it was down to 4 points a couple of different times. The Wolves could have gotten it even closer, but it was 6 points going to the fourth. And then the fourth quarter, and you could include the third quarter. The fourth quarter was like the best stretch of basketball we've seen this season in a Wolves game, for both teams. It was just a heavyweight bout. These teams were just throwing punches, and it wasn't like it was just a track meet with no defense. Both teams were locked in and playing strong defensively. It was just elite shot making from both teams. It wasn't sloppy offense. It wasn't haphazard defense. It was just good basketball. 2 playoff teams, 2 teams that surely should get to the second round or further in this year's playoffs. That's what this was. Full strength teams, everybody basically except for Kyle Lowry, played in this game. Just haymakers. And there were a couple of sequences that were just so much fun, but really the whole quarter, and you could even include some of the third quarter. Late in this game, it was Rudy Gobert, number 1, stands out to me with the way he completely shut down the paint. The Wolves gave up way too many paint points in the first half. They were 30 points or something in the paint. Remember, they gave up 70 in the paint against the Pacers on Saturday. We're a minus 20 in paint points, but still ended up winning that game because they just shot the lights out from 3 and did a really good job otherwise against Indiana, forced them into some tough 3-point shots, etc. They finished this game giving up 54 paint points, but more than half of those were in the first half. The Wolves, by the way, ended up a +2 in paint points in this game. They were much better. Their centers were much better in the paint against Bam Adebayo, nonetheless. So Rudy keying the defense, and this is just another game. You could cut up almost every possession that he was on the floor and didn't necessarily record a stat, right? How many shots did he block in this game? Rudy only blocked 2 shots, which is fine, right? But he altered how many more? And this isn't just we've thrown this out there for, everybody throws this out there for centers, he altered some shots. But not just altering shots, but guys not even taking shots because Rudy Gobert is in the same area code. He's not just altering shots, he's deterring top-level athletes and really good NBA players from even attempting a shot within 10, 12 feet of the bucket because he's there. And Bam Adebayo was amazing and launched a few shots himself where he just kind of they were lollipop jumpers over the top of Rudy, and he made a bunch of them. He ended up 10 and 22 points on 22 shots, not ultra efficient. But Bam played really well, especially early in the game. In the second half, Rudy forced him into, there were a couple of those that touched every part of the rim and fell through. There were several others that fell off because that's what all Rudy was allowing him to do. And there was I want to get into kind of late in the game in the fourth quarter. Then we'll get into key takeaways. There's just so much to talk about with this game. I'm probably going to spill some of it over into Wednesday's show. I'm just so hyped about everything about this performance. And just there's so much to unpack. So I want to get into some of the fourth quarter stuff, a couple key takeaways. We will do individual studs and duds here at the end, and that's how we'll spend the rest of the show here today. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Basketball host Josh Lloyd to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a daily draft or scouting the waiver wire, every week we're going to provide you players that are guaranteed to fit on your roster. So let's see who Josh has picked out for us on this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And actually, none of these guys are players the Wolves are about to play, but here after the first of the year, the Wolves will actually get to face the Houston Rockets for the first time. I think it's like January 5th. And as of right now, Tari Eason, still coming off the bench for Houston, is going to have plenty of opportunity. Ime Udoka, their head coach, has found minutes for him. He's a strong fantasy value permanent option who becomes useful to everyone. As these minutes tick upwards, he may play a lot here in the coming weeks for the Houston Rockets. Josh Lloyd from Locked On Fantasy Basketball is going to help you win your fantasy championship. And eBay Motors knows a championship team is about each player being a perfect fit. It's the same with your vehicle. My first car was a Mercury Tracer. I think it was like a 95 Mercury Tracer. So I guess dating myself. I don't know. It was amazing. Like, I loved it. It was my first car. If eBay Motors had been around then, I would have kept it running for so much longer. As it was, I probably didn't treat it the way that I could have, as many of us probably was the case with our first car, depending on what it was. But eBay Motors would have been the best thing to have at the time. eBay Motors is fantastic to keep your car running, or maybe get you a cool upgrade that you really want for your vehicle. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. All right, where do we leave off here? I'm at 11 right now about this game. This was unbelievable. Fourth quarter. So fourth quarter Wolves offense down 6 going to the fourth quarter. They end up scoring 35 in the period. And this was like the perfect mix of set plays, actual ball movement, swinging the ball from one side of the floor to the other. Looking for cutters, finding open shooters, driving and kicking, like all the stuff you want to see out of a modern NBA offense. It was the right mix of that. And then late, like, there's always some ISO play late in games, right? Like, that's always a big deal in the playoffs. Like, it's just, when the game slows down, you got to have guys that can score when stuff breaks down or things don't go according to plan, or you have to take the ball to the basket or after a made free throw, whatever. And both Karl-Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards had moments where they simply just scored because they had to, and they could. Cat had, in particular, there was the step back over Jimmy Butler, which was a ton of fun. That was, like, Wolves were up 1 at the time, and Cat kind of shouldered Butler, but he didn't push off it didn't extend his arm at all. So they're not going to call that with 2 minutes left in the game. Hits, mid-range, 15-footer or so from the left baseline over Jimmy Butler. There was also a straight line drive that he had just a little bit before that. I'm trying to see if I can find the timestamp, if you will, kind of middle fourth quarter, when Karl-Anthony Towns, a straight line drive, hit a tough layup in the paint because he could, right? There was the Anthony Edwards bucket, which was just unbelievable. And I said this, I think I said it. Did I say it in the opener? I maybe said it in the Locked On Now video I did, the short over at YouTube right after the game. Ant hit that turnaround from the right side of the floor, and it was Jordan-esque. Like, I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry. I'm not going to apologize. It legitimately was. Like, nobody's doing that. Nobody's going left shoulder turnaround jumper, banking it from, 15, 14 feet, whatever it was. Nobody's doing that. Like, that's Jordan. That's Kobe. Like, Kevin Garnett was usually a right shoulder turn guy, but he could make that. Like, there's a very short list of guys in history that do that and make it. And he makes this, by the way, this wasn't like Ant doesn't shoot that shot all the time and miss it most of the time and just happen to make it here. Like, he doesn't shoot that shot that often, but when he does, it goes in a fair amount, right? Like, that wasn't fluky. If you watch the Timberwolves all the time, Ant tries to bank in. There was one he shot in the first half that was a weird angle. It was like probably a 20-footer that he tried to bank from the left side of the floor in the first half. And I said out loud, like, that was a weird shot to try and bank in. Ant loves going glass. He does it all the time. This was by design, just an absolute Jordan-esque shot. And I think Jim Peterson said it on the broadcast too on Bally Sports North. It was. And that's not slanderous. Like, that's what that was. It was unreal. And that sort of shot making, plus the majority of the offense in the fourth quarter, which was ball movement, it was spacing, it was cutting, it was big shots from Mike Conley, it was big shots from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. It was offensive rebounds from Cat, the lob to Rudy. Cat was lucky he didn't get called for a hook there after that. And I don't know that I think he was passing it. He might've been shooting it. Either way, it didn't matter. It counted just the same. Like, everything about that fourth quarter for the Wolves, offensively especially, was so phenomenal. It was the absolute right mix of all of the things I already mentioned on the offensive side of the floor. I also want to shout out, we'll talk about him in studs and duds, but real quick, Nickeil Alexander-Walker in this game was so good. And he came off the bench. He only played 22 minutes because Jaden McDaniels was healthy and he ultimately fouled out. And that's why Alexander-Walker was on the floor at the close of the game. But when McDaniels was on the floor or off the floor with the four personals, first part of the fourth quarter, especially as the Wolves were kind of trying to get over the hump here and go from, 6-8 point deficit to taking the lead, Alexander-Walker was phenomenal. He hit 2 threes in this game, 2 of 4 from outside the arc. They were both sidestep threes where he took essentially an escape dribble, step to the side. One was from the left slot. The other was from the right corner. And they were both in the second half. They were both big shots. As a playmaker, he had 3 assists in this game. Just smart plays. As a defender, awesome defensively. Very good down the stretch after McDaniels fouled out. If you didn't watch this game, you'd be like, 8-3. All right, shot 2 of 5. Must have had he contributed, right? More than that. Like I said, I'm going to mention him in studs and duds. Like, I think he's got to get one of the studs in this game. I know the line isn't like, it's not a sexy box score line, but he was awesome. And by the way, like, I didn't even know this before I had in my notes. I wanted to talk about him. I'm looking at the box score right now. He was a plus 13 in this game. He was a plus 13. Nobody else on the Wolves was greater than a plus 6. And Nickeil Alexander-Walker was a plus 13. Single player individual game plus minus is very fickle, and I don't like it. But when he's 7 points better than everyone else and is a plus 13 in a game that finished with a 4-point margin, he did something right. And in this game, he did a lot of stuff right. Nickeil Alexander-Walker was fantastic in this game. So he gets that extra shout out here as part of my key takeaways. Some other takeaways, I mentioned this off the top, and this is related to Alexander-Walker. The depth of this team combined with the star power is unreal. The fact that you can have Cat and McDaniels out with foul trouble and bring in Reid, who I'm barely going to talk about it. He had 15 points in this game. He missed some threes that he normally makes, but played really well. When the Wolves needed points in both the second and third quarters with Cat on the bench, Nas had at least 3 of his 5 buckets were straight line drives where he just beat somebody off the dribble. Because usually the guys guarding Nas just aren't as quick as he is. It's the same thing with Karl-Anthony. It's the same thing we see with Karl-Anthony Towns. And Nas has an athleticism edge on Cat for sure. I don't know wingspan-wise. I could look it up. I'm guessing Cat's a little bigger. But Nas has that burst even more so than Cat does. And he's got that touch around the rim. And guys like somehow still aren't expecting it. Like the Mavs tried to guard him with Luka the other night. Like that wasn't going to work. And Nas was such a big part of this. This is the Wolves' depth showing through. Troy Brown only played 5 minutes in this game. Shake Milton, Jordan McLaughlin, these guys aren't part of the rotation anymore. They would be for 27 NBA teams, something like that. Like, I mean, Troy Brown only played 5 minutes. So the Wolves had 8 guys play 21 or more minutes in this game. Every starter played at least 30 minutes. And McDaniels was the low man among the starters with 30 minutes played because he fouled out in this game. So the Wolves depth and then obviously the high-end star power. Ants, we'll talk about his line. We'll talk about Cat a little bit more. We'll talk about Rudy. Like these guys all contributed as you'd expect them to. The stars were stars in this game. I mentioned this in passing in the first segment. Structure is a good thing with the Wolves offense. Chris Finch talked when the offense struggled a bunch early in the season about needing a little bit more structure. This game's another example of that. There wasn't much of it early. As they started to run some more set plays, some more horn sets, some more things to actually get them into some actions, the offense snowballed in a good way from there, right? Like the snowball got rolling down the hill, and the Wolves started scoring in bunches at in stretches of this game. Had 35 points in the fourth quarter alone. Which are, by the way, I was about to say free throws. That reminded me. I forgot to mention this with Nah. He had a couple big free throws late in this game too, when the Wolves had to go back up by 2 possessions when he were playing the foul game. Big free throws from Alexander Walker late. But offensive structure, when the Wolves get playground, like they can make it work simply because if Ant's on a heater, like he's not going to miss anyway, and Cat can get to the line, and Nas is nuts. Like these guys can still score, but it's not a recipe for consistent success. It's nice to go there it's nice to be able to go there if you need to, but they need a bit more offensive structure in general. And we saw that middle stages of this game at times in the fourth quarter. It was really good. Last thing, and I don't want to spend a lot of time here because the Wolves are 20-5, right? But I'll be that guy, like only for a moment though, because I hate that guy, but I'm going to be that guy. Why not do this earlier, right? Like the Wolves at some point need to get locked in early. They're not going to be able to have the energy, the stamina to do this every night, to make this comeback like the Wolves did, against Indiana, the way the Wolves did it against Dallas. And like, I lose track of all the games they did it in, but like, just get a lead and hold on. Now the schedule upcoming is not going to be conducive to that. Like at Philly Wednesday, then back-to-back home for the Lakers Thursday. Like, come on, I'm not saying they should get up 17 early against these teams. I mean, it'd be great if they did, but this is a tough stretch to ask the Wolves to do that in. But in general, if they could just not get down by that much, I'm not saying they should flip the script and get up by that much every night. Just play a close game and then maybe pull away, which is often what we see them doing against inferior teams. But against some of these other playoff teams like Dallas, Indiana, Miami, they're falling behind early, having to expend all this energy to come back. In Dallas's case, it happened much quicker, but the Pacers game, the Heat game was later. Like, I don't know, like maybe just do what you do late in the game. And Rudy, I think, said this post game. He said something about, we can hang our hat on our he didn't say these words, but he basically said we can count on our defense when we need to. And we could go right back there and get to where we need to be. We just got to do it earlier in games, right? Like that's the biggest thing for the Wolves right now, because clearly they can win these close games. They have the confidence to do it at home, on the road, regardless of who's on the floor for the opponent. But like, hey, let's not fall down by 15, 17 points like the last couple of times out. Let's not do that consistently moving forward. All right. Let's close with individual studs and duds. We'll put a bow on this. We'll take a quick peek at what's up next on the schedule for the Wolves. We'll do all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends over at Game Time. You should not have to worry about where you're buying tickets to your next big event. Game Time is the absolute best place to find tickets. They're the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you, with killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their best price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. You can see the view from your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Plus, their all-in prices show you your total up front, so you know you're getting a great deal without hidden fees. And you can buy your tickets in seconds with 2 taps. Plus, with zone deals, you can pick the section and Game Time picks the seats for an average of 18% savings. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDON NBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, quick before we get to individual studs and duds, I'm throwing up, if you're watching on YouTube, the stats from this game. The Timberwolves, like across the board, were very equal. This is a very equal game, right? The Wolves committed one more foul. They were +5 in the rebound category. They were +2 in the turnover category, meaning they committed 2 less turnovers than Miami. Each team made 11 3-pointers. Wolves 11 of 29, Miami 11 of 30. The Wolves just simply shot from the field a little bit better. They had a slight edge in terms of points in the paint. Each team got to the line. Miami was 15 of 18 at the line. The Wolves were 17 of 19, so a slight advantage there. That was mostly because of end of game fouling from Miami to try and catch up late. So pretty even night. And Miami's a really good defensive rebounding team. They came into the game, according to Basketball Reference, third in defensive rebound rate. And the Wolves still managed to log 12 offensive rebounds in this game, 4 for Cat, 3 for Rudy, and 3 for Jaden McDaniels. So a strong night on the glass for the Wolves. And that's one of those that if you're a regular listener or viewer of the show, I talk about that all the time because the Wolves have been so bad on the glass, especially on the defensive glass for years now. And they came to play on the defensive glass or on both ends of the floor on the glass in this game. So that was really good to see. Let's see. Second half. Oh, one more note. I saw that John Krasinski posted this on X, and I'm just going to read, obviously credit John. I'm going to read his tweet regarding the Wolves defense. I just finished talking about their defense in the second half. I just saw this post from John. He said the Wolves in the second half allowed 42 points total, which, by the way, I mentioned this, 17 in the second quarter. I don't think I said this earlier. Miami didn't make a field goal in the fourth quarter of this game until the 8-11 mark. So basically 4 minutes into the fourth quarter before Miami made a shot from the field. Overall in the second half, John says 42 points allowed. Miami shot 36% from the field, 35% from three, 66 from the free throw line. The Wolves forced 6 turnovers, had 5 blocks and 4 steals. Butler in the second half of this game, 3 points on 1 of 5 shooting, and Tyler Hero just 8 points. And Hero killed the Wolves in the first half of this game. Hero finished with 25 points on 18 shots. He only had 8 points in the second half. So he had 17 in the first half, 8 in the second. And Butler finished with 15 points on 12 shots. He had 3 points on 5 shots in the second half. So outstanding second half defense for Minnesota, as we already talked about. All right, individual studs and duds. Obviously, Anthony Edwards, we talked about his Jordan-esque shot. I'm just going to keep saying it because that's what it was. 32 points, 13 of 25 shooting. He was better than 50% from the field, but he was 2 of 9 on three-pointers in this game. And they were both cold-blooded, by the way, the threes that he made, but he missed 7 of them. So, I mean, what does that mean? He was 11 of 16 on 2-point shots. That's incredible. He only attempted 4 free throws, which is a joke. And I'll say it this time. I didn't think he deserved more free throws last game. He should have more free throw attempts in this game. And it was pretty equal both ways. Like nobody on Miami, like nobody on the Wolves shot more than 4 free throws. Butler had 6 for Miami. Nobody else had more than 4. Like it was the refs. I think overall the officiating was fine. At some point, when Anthony Edwards shoots 16 2-point shots, he's got to get more than 4 free throw attempts. I'm sorry. Like it's the curse. It's almost like the Shaq version of a guard where he's so big that people bounce off him. And I don't get why he's not getting more free throw attempts. The free throw rate's up for him this year. And especially earlier in the season, it certainly was up, but lately I feel like he's just not getting to the line as much. So something to keep an eye on, but ultra efficient from the mid-range, ultra efficient from the paint in this game. He had a bunch of dunks and layups too. He had a couple nice dunks in transition. I didn't even talk about the sequence, but the Ant dunk off the beautiful pass. He had the backdoor cut, or really it was a dribble handoff, and Ant went baseline. Cat dumped it off to Ant. Perfect pass. Ant dunks it over a couple of Heat players. The other end, Rudy gets a block. I think a left-handed block on Bam Adebayo. Just spikes the ball. Ant grabs it. Aggressive play by Ant. Really good job getting the loose ball. 50-50 ball. Streaks down the court. Gets another dunk. It was Ant dunk on a pretty Cat pass. Rudy block. Ant dunk on the fast break. A fantastic sequence. Ant was great in this game. He also had 8 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals. Only one single solitary turnover in 40 minutes for Anthony Edwards. The dude attempted 25 shots and had 5 assists in this game. Massive usage rate. One single turnover for Anthony Edwards and shot better than 50% from the field. It doesn't get any better. He was phenomenal in this game. I'm also going to give one to Cat. Like 18 and 8, not the most eye-popping line, but he was good. 7 of 14 shooting, 1 of 4 on threes, 3 of 3 at the line, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, contributed defensively. I thought, that pass to Ant at a big, actually his 2 assists were that pass to Ant in the fourth quarter, mid-fourth quarter, late in the fourth quarter, that lob pass to Rudy. He had 2 assists in the game. They were both late in the fourth quarter. Cat played awesome down the stretch, and that's why he gets a stud here. He was actually the Wolves' one of only 2 Wolves players that had a negative plus minus. I don't care. He was good in this game. I'm going to give one to Rudy. I'm going to give 4 today. I don't care. I'm going to give one to Rudy. 9 points, 3 of 8 shooting, 16 boards. Phenomenal defense. 2 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks, only 1 turnover for Rudy Gobert. Not super involved early. His glass work was huge, and his defense in the second half, we talked about already, phenomenal. Nas was good. We talked about him, but I got to give a fourth stud to Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I know the line doesn't pop off the page. Already talked a bunch about him last segment, so not much more to say other than big shots, big passes, big defensive plays, all when the Wolves needed it most. Just a very strong role player game. Like it's top line grade A role player play. Is what we saw in this game from Nickeil Alexander-Walker. Fantastic. Jaden McDaniels was good, other than the foul trouble, by the way. 10 and 5 for Jaden. 5 of 10 shooting. Didn't attempt a single three-pointer. Was very aggressive early when the Heat were kind of, daring him to shoot. And teams do that, right? Like, you look at the 5 the Wolves have on the floor. They're obviously protecting the paint and the rim with Rudy and lobs. You're trying to stop Cat and Ant. And you don't want Conley to shoot open threes. McDaniels is the guy teams are going to dare to beat them. And he's been happy to shoot the ball and has done a pretty good job. He also had 3 blocks in this game in 30 minutes. He did foul out, but no duds. I mean, everybody played well. Troy Brown only played 5 minutes. He knocked down a 3 in those 5 minutes. I thought he was fine. Like, no duds in this game. Just a really strong all-around Timberwolves performance. There's really nothing else to say. I've said a lot. I feel like this performance was extremely impressive. The Wolves have Philly on Wednesday night. We'll preview that on Wednesday. We'll get into some cleaning the glass stuff and just how good the Wolves offense and defense has been against other strong offensive and defensive units to this point in the season. I don't care who's on the floor. If you're playing a team that has a good offensive unit or a good defensive unit, if somebody's missing, the rest of that team is still good enough, right? Like, that team's not accidentally a top flight unit in their respective, category. So we'll talk about that Wednesday. I also want to preview that Sixers matchup. And then Thursday night, the Wolves have the Lakers. So a back-to-back Wednesday, Thursday. Both those games are on NBA TV. So anyway, we'll get into all that Wednesday. That's all we have for you today on the show. A big thank you to those that do make Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also watch on YouTube, as well as the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. And you can follow on X at Locked On T-Wolves and also at Beecken, with 2 B's, 2 E's, C-K-E-N. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Remember, the Locked On Network is your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.